The fog over Pokrovsk was supposed to protect them. Instead, it became the moment everything unraveled. At 4:17 a.m. on a freezing November 10th, Russian Mad Max units, motorcycles, Bukhanka vans, and scattered infantry raced through the gray haze toward the city's western edge. They believed they were invisible. They believed Ukraine couldn't see through the wall of mist, and Moscow believed it finally had a victory to show after weeks of punishing losses. But one detail changed everything. A Kremlin propagandist, desperate to impress superiors, posted a 52-second victory video showing the exact infiltration route, every bend, every structure, every turn on the Selidovo-Pokrovsk highway. Within hours, Ukrainian thermal FPV drones locked onto the heat signatures of the engines, picking off the convoy one after another, and then came the real blow. 5 days later, November 15th, 2025, 11:08 a.m. A Ukrainian fighter jet appeared high above the cloud line. A glide bomb dropped away, then a second. Each carried more than 225 kilograms of explosive force. Both struck the exact stretch of road shown in the propagandist's video. 2 blasts, 2 massive craters. The entire Russian supply artery was erased in a single strike. Traffic, impossible. Reinforcements, stranded. Fuel trucks, trapped. A logistics network supporting as many as 170,000 Russian troops collapsed in seconds. Ukraine didn't just stop an attack. It flipped the battlefield. But the most shocking part wasn't the destruction, it was what came next. Because the airstrike exposed a deeper truth about Russia's collapsing air defenses, Ukraine's evolving air power, and a war that is shifting faster than anyone expected. And then the unthinkable happened. To understand why a single airstrike on a 2-lane road sent shockwaves through the entire Donbas front, the story must be placed inside the broader landscape of a war that has transformed dramatically by late 2025. Pokrovsk is not just another contested point on the map, it is the hinge on which the entire northern Donetsk region turns. For 11 years, since the first clashes in 2014, Russia has tried, and failed, to secure full control of Donetsk. Pokrovsk remains the last major urban and logistical hub preventing that objective. Its location explains everything. The city sits just south of the critical M04 highway, a corridor feeding Ukrainian positions in Kostiantynivka, Kramatorsk, and Slovyansk. These cities form Ukraine's backbone in the Donbas. If the M04 collapses, so does the entire line. Russia knows this. Ukraine knows this. NATO analysts know this. The stakes are enormous. This is why the Kremlin redirected between 150,000 and 170,000 troops to the Pokrovsk direction in the past year, a concentration not seen since the battles for Bakhmut. But while Russia amassed manpower, Ukraine adapted technology. Cheap drones, smart bombs, real-time geolocation, precise strikes from 50 to 70 kilometers away. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Russia uses mass, Ukraine uses precision. These differences matter because Russia's traditional strengths, armor, artillery, and overwhelming fire, have eroded. FPV drones turned tanks into liabilities. Thermal sensors blinded infiltration tactics. And the large mechanized pushes that once defined Russian doctrine now crumble under small, inexpensive systems. Meanwhile, the political context adds pressure. President Donald Trump, now back in office, has pushed for a transactional approach. US support continues, but with stricter oversight and demands for faster Ukrainian battlefield gains. Europe remains uneasy, facing its own economic pressures. Russia's leadership, under internal strain, needs symbolic wins to justify continued mobilization. This is why Kremlin propagandists are operating under unprecedented pressure. The Russian public has seen months of stagnation. The generals need victories to display on state TV. When none exist, they fabricate them. And that's exactly what happened in early November. The fog, the motorcycles, the infiltrations, this was supposed to be the story proving momentum. Instead, it exposed desperation. And once that video reached Ukrainian analysts, the dynamic shifted instantly. What was meant to be a show of strength became evidence of vulnerability. The contrast is striking. Moscow celebrated a symbolic advance, while Ukraine used the footage to execute a strategic strike that halted an entire offensive. Now the battle for Pokrovsk is no longer just a fight over territory. It is a race between two systems: mass versus precision, speed versus accuracy, old doctrine versus new warfare. And this tension is about to erupt into even more dramatic escalation. The chain of events that led to the November 15th strike did not erupt in a single moment. It unfolded like a slow slow-motion collapse, one decision after another, each driven by pressure, each compounding the next, until the entire Russian effort around Pokrovsk spiraled out of control. It began in late October, when Russian commanders realized their mechanized strategy had failed. Satellite imagery, battlefield footage, and independent assessments confirmed what Ukrainian units were seeing on the ground. Columns of armored vehicles, BMPs, and tanks were being neutralized before they even reached the front line. Ukraine's FPV drone operators, armed with thermal sensors and high-precision charges, dismantled convoys worth tens of millions of dollars. Reuters and Defense News highlighted that several Russian brigades lost over 30% of their armored strength in the Pokrovsk sector in just 2 weeks. With armored assaults stalled, Russia shifted to infantry-heavy tactics. Thousands of mobilized soldiers, many newly trained, some barely trained at all, were ordered to storm trenches under constant drone surveillance. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that more than 25,000 Russian casualties were recorded in the Pokrovsk direction in October alone, a number later echoed by analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. Even Kremlin-aligned bloggers admitted the pace of losses was unsustainable. By November 5th, the situation had deteriorated so sharply that Russian units began searching for alternative infiltration methods. They attempted small group penetration with 300 soldiers dressed in civilian clothes. The operation briefly succeeded. The infiltrators seized the Pokrovsk City Council building, but within hours, Ukraine's 425th Skelia Regiment counterattacked, reclaiming the building and raising the Ukrainian flag. That symbolic attempt at victory turned into another humiliation, broadcast widely across Ukrainian and Western platforms. And so came the next plan. The Mad Max offensive. On November 10th, dense fog covered Pokrovsk and its surroundings. Russian commanders believed this was their chance. Instead of armor, which drones could easily target, they pushed light vehicles, motorcycles, old Bukanka vans, low-profile minibuses. They hoped speed and fog would compensate for the absence of heavy protection. In theory, it was clever. In reality, it was catastrophic, because Ukraine's 68th Jaeger Brigade, known as the Hornets, had already adapted. Their FPV drones carried thermal cameras that pierced through fog like sunlight through glass. Engine heat signatures glowed on their screens like bright neon targets. The Russian units never had a chance to react. Drone operators tracked them, pursued them, and eliminated them one after another. A Russian military blogger, Boris Rozhin, admitted the truth openly. UAVs now monitor every access route, and only a few can cross these barriers alive. But the most consequential mistake came next, not on the battlefield, but online. Under immense political pressure, one of the Kremlin's most visible propagandists, Alexander Kots, released a victory video on November 11th. He showcased the motorcycle infiltration as if it were a massive breakthrough. The footage revealed the entire Russian route, every turn, landmark, and kilometer marker on the Selidovo-Pokrovsk highway. It was a gift to Ukraine's intelligence community, a perfectly packaged visual map of the enemy's main supply artery. Within 24 hours, Ukrainian analysts geolocated the footage. OSINT accounts cross-referenced the shadows, structures, and road layout. Drone teams confirmed traffic patterns. By November 14th, Ukraine's Air Force had coordinates locked. At the same time, another critical development was unfolding hundreds of miles away. Ukraine launched a massive drone barrage on Novorossiysk, targeting Russia's naval and air defense assets. For the first time, Ukraine used upgraded land-based Neptune missiles against S-400 components. Images published on November 15th showed at least 4 destroyed S-400 launchers, along with 2 96N6 early warning radars and 2 92N6 fire control radars, equipment so expensive and rare that Western defense publications highlighted the strike as one of Russia's most severe air defense losses since the start of the war. These destroyed systems created temporary corridors in the sky, openings that Ukrainian jets could exploit. And early on November 15th, they did. A Ukrainian fighter jet, either a modernized MiG-29 equipped with Western munitions or an early operational F-16, released 2 glide bombs. Each carried more than 225 kilograms of explosive force. They glided nearly 70 kilometers before striking the Selidovo-Pokrovsk highway. The detonation sent debris flying dozens of feet into the air. Drone footage confirmed 2 enormous craters. The road was no longer passable for motorcycles, minibuses, trucks, or armor. Russian supply convoys froze. Reinforcements stalled. Fuel lines were severed. Communication between southern and northern Russian units became chaotic. And within hours, the same propagandist who released the infiltration footage posted a defeated confession. The route he had shown was now impassable. But the escalation didn't stop there. Almost simultaneously in the Zaporizhia region, another Ukrainian jet struck a key Russian crossing near Kamyanska, the only high-quality asphalt road in that entire sector. Analysts confirmed the use of US-made GBU-62 JDAMER glide bombs. 2 fronts, 2 strikes, 2 arteries cut. Russia's Plan B, fast, light vehicle infiltration, had evaporated. What started as a desperate attempt to find new momentum had triggered a chain reaction that crippled the offensive and exposed the deeper systemic problem. Russia's battlefield decisions aren't driven by strategy anymore. They're driven by propaganda pressure, political desperation, and the need to show progress at any cost. And that cost is now becoming visible on every major front. The twin strikes on November 15th did more than destroy a road. They dismantled the operational framework of Russia's Pokrovsk offensive and exposed structural weaknesses that had been building for months. Every major outlet, from Reuters to DW to Defense News, noted the same theme. Russia's military effort in the Donbas is increasingly shaped by logistics, not tactics. And when logistics fail, the front collapses. The Salidovo-Pokrovsk highway wasn't just a secondary road. It was the central artery feeding Russia's light vehicle infiltration network. Motorcycles, vans, fuel carriers, ammunition trucks. With 2 craters blocking the route, Russia's ability to reinforce forward units became fragmented overnight. A Russian grouping estimated between 150,000 and 170,000 troops suddenly faced logistical isolation on multiple axes. Supply trucks had to detour through smaller dirt paths vulnerable to drones, artillery, and ambushes. The economic burden was immediate. Russian units along the Pokrovsk line consumed thousands of gallons of fuel every day. According to BBC reporting on Russia's wartime fuel consumption, sustaining operations at this scale demands continuous deliveries, often 200 to 300 trucks weekly. With the main road severed, fuel efficiency plummeted and distribution slowed. This created bottlenecks not only at the front but deep inside Russian rear areas, where convoys waited for hours or days to get clearance to move. The Ukrainian strikes also had a psychological effect. Russian soldiers interviewed in Russian-language telegram channels, often cited by OSINT monitors, described panic as they realized reinforcements could not reach them as quickly as before. One unit near Pokrovsk reported they were cut off for 8 hours during the chaos that followed. Ukrainian drone operators observed scattered Russian vehicles trying to maneuver around the craters, only to be targeted in the open. But the consequences extend far beyond Pokrovsk. The flow of mobilized fighters from Russia's interior regions relies heavily on predictable transport lines. Defense News highlighted that Russia increasingly depends on light vehicles and makeshift minibuses due to the loss of thousands of military trucks since 2022. These vehicles require paved roads. When those roads disappear, the entire light mobility strategy collapses. And that collapse now threatens Russia's ability to execute its largest concentration of forces since Bakhmut. Then came the Zaporizhia strike. The destruction of the high-quality asphalt road near Kamyansky created a north-south disruption that analysts at Jane's Defense Weekly described as a logistics severance event. Russia's supply chain in the south, already stretched thin, now faces another choke point. That road was the only fast route enabling rotations, medevacs, and ammunition deliveries. Its loss creates a cascading effect that weakens Russia's ability to support positions along the Dnipro corridor. Together, the Pokrovsk and Zaporizhia strikes created a dual-front logistical contraction, something rare in this war. For the first time, Russia is forced to slow operations because it cannot guarantee stable supply lines. And slow operations favor Ukraine's drone-centric warfare, which thrives when Russian units bunch up or wait for transport clearance. The November 15th strikes also amplified another critical issue: Russia's shrinking air defense umbrella. The S-400 losses at Novorossiysk, 4 launchers, 2 early warning radars, 2 fire control radars, were among the most significant setbacks for Russia's air defense in the entire conflict. Analysts from Reuters noted that S-400 radars cost millions and take months to replace. Without these radars, Russia's detection coverage along southern corridors weakens, allowing Ukrainian jets more freedom to operate. This is exactly what enabled the Pokrovsk and Zaporizhia strikes. It was not simply a tactical decision, it was the consequence of a massive air defense failure. Ukraine seized that vulnerability instantly. The strategic impact is now visible in 3 major areas. First, operational tempo. Russia cannot sustain high-tempo offensives without consistent supplies. With two supply lines disrupted, Russian thrusts slow, and Ukrainian defenders gain breathing room. Second, territorial control. Pokrovsk sits at a logistical crossroads. If Ukraine holds the M04 while Russia struggles to supply its forces, the front line could stabilize or even shift in Ukraine's favor. Third, morale and perception. Major outlets across Europe and the US have emphasized Russia's reliance on propaganda-driven decisions. When a propagandist accidentally reveals an infiltration route that leads to a strategic loss, it damages internal confidence. Russian soldiers see incompetence from above. Ukrainian forces see opportunity. The November 15th strike is a textbook demonstration of precision warfare overwhelming brute force. A $25,000 guidance kit transformed an old iron bomb into a weapon capable of inflicting millions in strategic losses. The contrast, cheap precision versus costly mistakes, defines modern war. And now the battlefield is entering a new phase, one that reaches beyond Pokrovsk, beyond Donbas, and even beyond Ukraine itself. Because the effects are spreading across the geopolitical landscape, shaping decisions in NATO capitals, Beijing strategy rooms, and Washington's war councils. The shockwaves from the Pokrovsk and Zaporizhia strikes did not stop at the front line. Within hours, the footage of two destroyed highways, two collapsed infiltration routes, and the smoking remains of Russian S-400 systems were circulating through NATO intelligence channels, European defense ministries, and Washington policy briefings. The world saw something more than battlefield chaos. It saw a turning point. Because this was not just a Ukrainian victory. It was a demonstration, clear, public, undeniable, that modern war is shifting from heavy machines to precision disruption. A $20 million armored column can be neutralized by a $500 drone. A 200-kilometer logistics corridor can collapse because a single fighter jet releases a glide bomb from 70 kilometers away. The battlefield has changed, and every major power is watching closely. In NATO's headquarters in Brussels, military planners began reassessing mobility doctrine. Reports from multiple outlets emphasize that Russian forces, forced off paved roads, now rely heavily on mud tracks where even basic resupply becomes unpredictable. NATO countries understand the implication. Any future conflict, whether in Eastern Europe or the Arctic, will hinge on infrastructure denial and rapid strike precision. Glide bombs like JDAMER and European AASM hammer kits have become the new centerpiece of tactical disruption. European analysts, particularly in Germany and Poland, drew immediate comparisons to their own force structures. They noted that Russia's failure was not simply technological, it was doctrinal. Moscow attempted to fight a 2025 war with 1980s logic: mass troops, heavy armor, and large assaults. The problem? These formations cannot survive under the surveillance of hundreds of drones. DW's defense desk pointed out the strategic mismatch. Ukrainian drone fleets operate at a fraction of Russia's costs, but achieve exponentially greater battlefield effect. This contrast is not lost on China. Beijing's analysts, watching both the battlefield footage and Western commentary, are studying every detail. Chinese strategists are evaluating how Russia's vulnerabilities, road dependence, radar exposure, and slow logistics might mirror their own challenges in a potential Taiwan confrontation. Several US think tanks highlighted how precision strikes on key transport arteries could delay or halt amphibious operations. The Pokrovsk strike has become a case study in asymmetric disruption, and in Washington, the stakes are even higher. President Donald Trump, now months into his second term, has pushed a harder line on cost efficiency and results. His administration supports Ukraine, but only under strict performance-based frameworks. The November 15th strikes provided exactly what Washington needed: proof that US weapon systems, JDAM-ER guidance kits, precision munitions, and Western training can reshape the battlefield even without overwhelming troop numbers. White House briefings, according to major US outlets, highlighted three key outcomes. First, Ukrainian air power, long suppressed by Russian air defenses, is beginning to surface thanks to systematic targeting of S-400 batteries. Second, Russia's most important offensives can be halted with limited but precise Western support. Third, every successful strike reduces the burden on US logistics and funding. Even the Middle East took note. Israeli defense commentators pointed to the Ukrainian strikes as evidence that glide bombs can enable smaller air forces to bypass heavier air defense arrays. Saudi analysts, watching Ukraine's expanding use of long-range drones and radar-targeting weapons, are rethinking their own air defense acquisitions. Meanwhile, Russia's geopolitical position is narrowing. The Kremlin suffered a major reputational blow after the Novorossiysk strike exposed vulnerabilities in its S-400 systems Moscow has marketed worldwide as virtually impenetrable. India, Turkey, and other buyers of Russian technology quietly questioned whether they had purchased weapons capable of surviving a modern conflict. Reuters noted that Russia's arms exports have dropped sharply since early 2024. The November strikes are likely to accelerate that decline. But the most significant global shift is strategic timing. Analysts across NATO see the next 3 to 6 months as a crucial phase. Russia is expected to attempt new offensives before winter conditions harden the ground. Ukraine, empowered by F-16 integration and improved drone coordination, aims to exploit gaps in Russia's weakened logistics network. Experts predict 3 possible scenarios. First, Russia may attempt a renewed push toward Pokrovsk, using brute force to overwhelm weakened Ukrainian positions before Western aircraft become fully operational. This scenario is risky. With the main highway destroyed, resupply becomes harder, not easier. Second, Ukraine could leverage its air corridors and precision weapons to strike Russian depots and rear concentrations, disrupting an offensive before it begins. Several Jane's analysts believe the Ukrainian strategy is now shifting toward concentrated infrastructure denial. Third, a broader geopolitical escalation could unfold if Russia feels cornered, potentially involving cyber pressure on NATO states or intensified strikes across Ukraine's interior. In this scenario, NATO's monitoring posture will become even more critical. Every capital understands what November 15th revealed. A war once dominated by artillery and tanks is now defined by information leaks, cheap drones, and smart munitions. And if a single propagandist's video can shift the momentum of a major front, the balance of power is more fragile and more dynamic than ever. The world is learning that modern conflict is not about who has the biggest army, it's about who adapts fastest. And as winter approaches, that race is reaching its most dangerous phase yet. The events around Pokrovsk in November 2025 revealed something deeper than a failed Russian infiltration or a successful Ukrainian airstrike. They exposed the underlying truth of this war. The side that adapts faster defines the battlefield. For months, Russia relied on massive troop concentrations, massive artillery volumes, massive propaganda efforts. But in this new phase of the conflict, mass is no longer momentum. Speed, precision, and intelligence are. Ukraine turned a single leaked video into a strategic victory. A 52-second clip became coordinates. Coordinates became craters. And those craters became the symbol of a collapsing offensive. Russia tried motorcycles in fog. Ukraine countered with thermal drones. Russia pushed infiltration teams. Ukraine dismantled their routes. Russia depended on paved highways. Ukraine erased them with 2 bombs. This chain reaction showed the world that modern warfare is not just about weapons. It's about how quickly those weapons can change the rules. The destruction of Russia's S-400 radars in Novorossiysk opened air corridors that many analysts didn't believe possible this early. The glide bombs that hit the Seledovo-Pokrovsk road demonstrated the strategic reach of Western munitions, even when used from Soviet-era aircraft. And the strike near Kamyansk proved Ukraine could pressure Russia on multiple fronts simultaneously. For Ukrainian defenders, these victories buy time. For Russian commanders, they raise questions about control, coordination, and vulnerability. And for the world, they offer a glimpse into the future of warfare, one where information leaks matter as much as missiles, and where a single mistake can reshape an entire front. The coming months will test both sides. Winter will free supply lines. F-16 squadrons will reach full operational tempo. Russia may attempt a renewed offensive before that happens. Ukraine may intensify infrastructure targeting operations designed to break Russian momentum entirely. NATO will monitor every move. China will assess every weakness. Washington will measure every success. And now the biggest questions remain. Will Russia attempt to rebuild its Pokrovsk offensive despite crippled supply routes? Will Ukraine leverage its emerging air power to push Russia back before winter hardens the ground? And will the next decisive turning point come from a battlefield breakthrough or another critical intelligence mistake revealed to the world in a few seconds of footage? For now, the only certainty is that this war is changing faster than ever, and the next major shock may already be on the horizon. To follow every development, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve on breaking news, battlefield updates, and deep strategic analysis, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.